Now we have already studied about the different read caching strategies. We have studied about the cache aside strategy and the read through strategy. Let's now dive deeper into them and see the pros and cons associated with each of the strategies. First is our cache aside strategy. Now just recalling, in this strategy, the application would first check the data in the cache. If there is a cache miss, it would check the data in the database, and subsequently, it would then update the cache with that data for all future requests. Now the first pro with this strategy is increased fault tolerance. Why is this the case? Consider that our cache fails for any reason. In this case, the system doesn't break. The application can still read the data directly from the database, even though it may be a bit slower, but our operation doesn't face a downtime. So basically, since we have kept the cache as separate, hence cache aside as it's called, therefore it doesn't impact our uptime, even if the cache goes down. Second pro would be flexible schemas or flexible data models. Now in this case, since the application controls the cache, basically the application is responsible for updating the cache. Consequently, we have more flexibility in how we can store the data. The cache and the database can have different data structures. For example, the cache might only store commonly accessed details like user's name and contact details, while the database can hold the complete user profile. So there is an increased flexibility in data modeling. Now let's come to the cons. There is one main and primary con associated with this, which is the problem of stale data. Now let's say there is a user record, example user 4, that is initially only present in the database and not in the cache. Now when a read request comes in, there is a cache miss. There is a cache miss because our cache doesn't have this data yet. So we fetch the user 4's data from the database and then save it to the cache. Now all the future requests from this point for user 4's data will be served from the cache. But what happens if, meanwhile, the user 4's record in our database is updated? Let's say their address changed perhaps. In this case, our cache still holds the old address since it was never refreshed. Now if we get another request for user 4, it will still serve the outdated address from the cache. Now this is a problem. Now to avoid this, what can we do? We can periodically remove the old data from the cache, a process we call as the cache invalidation. Now after invalidation and eviction of that old data, whenever the next request for user 4 comes, we will have a cache miss. Now basically we have forced a cache miss with our cache invalidation and eviction. Now whenever we have a cache miss, what will happen? We'll fetch the updated data from the database and then our cache will be updated with this updated data. Let's now move to the read-through strategy. Just summarizing it once again, the reads in the read-through strategy happens through the cache. Basically, if the data is present in the cache, it would be served. If it's not present in the cache itself would read it from the database and then the data would be served to the application. Now, what are the pros of this approach? There is no stale data problem here. If we pair the read-through strategy with our write-through strategy, which is commonly the case, then we can be assured that the data in the cache would always stay fresh. Basically, every update that will happen with the help of write-through strategy. For example, let's say a change in user 4's address. Now, whenever this happens with the write-through strategy, we can be assured that it would be written both to the cache and the database synchronously at the same time. So whenever we read the data from the cache, it's guaranteed that the data would be up to date and fresh. Now let's come to the cons. First, cache failure can cause a downtime. Now if the cache fails for any reason, the application cannot read data directly from the database because in this strategy, all the reads go through a cache. So the cache failure could make the whole system unavailable. Second is less flexibility or less customization in our data modeling. Now in this approach, the cache and the database, they need to have the same data structure. Definitely this limits the flexibility since we cannot customize what is stored in the cache.